Welcome to Critical Junction, episode 64. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Gilles.
And between August and November of 1888, 5 women were murdered and horribly mutilated in London's unsavory Whitechapel district by the man who would become known as Jack the Ripper. Despite countless investigations, books, and movies to come in the 131 years since the murders took place, and despite the hundreds of suspects, the true identity of Jack the Ripper remains a mystery. Known as the Canonical Five in Ripper circles, all but one of the murdered women, namely Elizabeth Stride, were in some way mutilated by having specific organs removed, leading some to suspect the Ripper was in some way familiar with human anatomy. Mary Ann Polly Nichols, the Ripper's first victim, was murdered on August 31st and had her throat slashed twice and her stomach ripped open. On September 8th, Annie Chapman was discovered with her head almost severed and her stomach torn open and pulled apart. Sections of skin from the stomach lay on her left shoulder, while a mass of intestines was found on the right. Part of her vagina and bladder had also been carved out and taken away. On September 30th, 2 more victims were murdered within minutes of each other. Elizabeth Stride had her throat slashed, but when she was found, the blood was still flowing from the wound, indicating that the Ripper may have had his work interrupted. At 1:45 a.m., the body of Catherine Eddowes was found with her eyelids cut open and her nose and right ear removed. The uterus and left kidney were also removed and entrails thrown over her right shoulder. Finally, on November 9th, the youngest victim, Mary Jeanette Kelly, was found in her bed with her throat slashed and her nose and breasts cut off and dumped on a table, with her entrails draped over a picture frame. The body had been skinned and gutted, and her heart lay on the table. And then, just as suddenly as it all began, the string of grisly murders stopped and the killer remained at large. Now, thanks to advances in DNA analysis, forensic scientists claim to have finally solved the mystery. Earlier this year, in March of 2019, using samples from a blood and semen-stained shawl found next to the body of Catherine Eddowes, Larry Luhalalen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I don't think I am, a biochemist at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK, used DNA to point to Aaron Kosminski, a 23-year-old Polish barber and a prime police suspect at the time. According to Science Mag, quote, "The tests compared fragments of mitochondrial DNA, the portion of DNA inherited only from one's mother, retrieved from the shawl with samples taken from living descendants of Eddowes and Kosminski. The DNA matches that of a living relative of Kosminski. However, critics remain unconvinced as details on the specific genetic variants identified and compared between DNA samples are not included in the peer-reviewed paper. So, who was Jack the Ripper? Is this new DNA analysis enough to conclude Kosminski was the infamous serial killer, or will his mystery remain forever unsolved? Let's talk about that, shall we?
So what were they saying? Were they saying was the problem with the DNA sample or something?
There were a lot of problems with the DNA analysis. One of them was that specific genetic variants were not included in the report, which is weird. Also, the fact that the shawl thing. There's no chain of custody for the... That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, there's no chain of custody for the evidence.
Oh, she may have just had a bunch of sperm all over her shawl, in general. Is this what we're saying?
Well, the fact...
it may have been, in fact, a sperm ring?
Well,
the shawl?
The fact that the sperm is there is not the question. It's how did it get there?
Right. This is what I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
She could have been just wiping up sperm with it.
Well, this specific guy's sperm, yeah.
Right.
But there's no chain of custody. The fact that it's there, we don't know how it got there.
Right.
The piece of evidence has been handled many times over the years that it was purchased and came into this person's possession. And I think the researchers admitted that this kind of stuff is just not admissible in court.
Right.
So if it can't be used as courtroom evidence, why would we accept it as evidence in like a greater investigation like this?
In a sense, all it's saying is, hey, that guy's not excluded from what we can conclude.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there was also an error in the identification of the specific DNA strain or like one specific gene that they identified. I think it was like...
It's not like they actually matched
him
DNA, like his specific DNA.
So this was just a fun thing to look into and came out inconclusive is kind of what we can conclude.
the guy who wrote the report would like to conclude that it's this guy, but I don't know. I find it inconclusive. Like it's circumstantial evidence at best.
Right.
And the fact that they used mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from mother to mother, is really weird considering Kosminski is a guy. Like, to me, that just doesn't make sense.
Okay.
And apparently the inventor of genetic fingerprinting Sir Alec Jeffreys dismissed the claims as unreliable.
I see.
So you would think if anyone is familiar with the technology and its limitations, I think he has credibility there.
Yeah.
So when forensic people are trying to do like a profile, like a character profile or whatever you call it, like the murderer profile,
right?
One of the first
like
things they look at,
behavioral analysis.
the first thing they look at is organized or disorganized. So it does seem to be, would you say, organized? Like, does he seem organized in the way
Like
that he's
the
committing these
crimes?
crimes? Yeah, the crime scenes and the way that they're described, sort of thing.
He didn't leave any evidence behind him, which to me seems to indicate that he was fairly organized about executing them. He had, at the very least, cleaned up the scene, leaving only the victim. Right. And I think he was familiar with. He was definitely familiar with the area, right? Especially because of that one incident on September 30th when the two women were killed. I think within 45 minutes of each other or something. The fact that he killed one in haste and then ran away and then doubled back after killing the second victim would tend to, again, indicate that he's familiar with the area enough to blend in with an area that was crawling with police at the time and just kind of blended into the background.
And looking conspicuous and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like is there any sense of familiarity with the places? What about familiarity with the people? Would that be necessary? Like, if he's being interrupted, it sounds like he has no complete control of the environment. He's outside.
Well, he was only interrupted that one time.
That one time. Okay.
At least we suspect he was interrupted because of like the blood was still
blood being
fresh.
flowing. It was
yeah,
fresh.
Exactly. And he didn't commit any of the other disembowelments or whatever that he did with the other victims. It was just the slashing of the throat, and it looked really hastily done because the blood was still going. Must have been interrupted, or one would suspect that he was interrupted in the act.
Right.
I think most of the murders too were just kind of, in a sense, out in the open. Like most of the bodies were like found shortly after the murder. Like one of them is like pretty much in the street at a gate, and
right. The only exception to that is Mary Kelly, the last victim, who was found
in her room, in her bed,
with her clothes neatly folded off to the side as if she had just disrobed and packed. She was killed in her sleep, essentially, which is really weird.
At this point, though, he's been all over the media. We have no idea if, because of that last murder is a little bit different, it's done in a bedroom and stuff like that. I mean, at this point, it could be copycat killers and stuff like that too, right? Am I mistaken? Because there's a large media component to this murder. Am I wrong?
It was one of the first media frenzies, if you want to call it that, because people were like, literacy was just on the upswing around that time in London, so the general public was glomming on to the story in the media. But I don't know if it can necessarily be called a copycat killer, because it did have the signatures. Like, this was the worst of the mutilations too.
I guess what I'm getting at there is, at this point, they're putting everything out there.
They're not putting out
they're not putting out the details of the murders and stuff like that.
They're putting out certain details, but not like the surgical precision with which these things were carried out. Okay. That's what tells. That's the signature, right? Is because it looked like he had at least a passing familiarity with human anatomy, which is why some people suspected that it was a doctor doing this.
And I'm skeptical of that.
Oh yeah, so
of that conclusion too. Like these are like cops from the 1880s saying, oh, because he cuts out organs, then he must have some kind of knowledge. Right. Well, I've prepared chicken before where I've had to pull out organs. Right. I'm no expert of any kind. I just know the difference between an organ and a not an organ. It's not it's not a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And generally at this time, I think there's a general
these people are being
anatomy.
What's that?
At this time in history, there's anatomy is exciting. Like there's big
right. You've got
pushes
those, like,
in medicine and stuff like that.
Theaters.
Yeah.
Literal theaters and
yeah, exactly. They're doing this stuff out in the open where people are watching it. Like, they're doing operations in public and testing out shit in public.
Yeah, it's part of the zeitgeist.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm suspicious of it too. I don't necessarily
the whole thing about the precision. Yeah.
Well, may I ask, what is it? I'm sure this isn't the first serial killer in the history of serial killers or anything. But so, what is it that made this one so? What grabbed the attention here more so than others? Like, why did this one become? Like, was it really just timing and?
I think timing had a lot to do with it, and also that media frenzy thing.
Right.
One of the first examples thereof. But I think it's also the fact, combined with that media frenzy, is that he was taunting police while he was committing these atrocities. One thinks, because of the letters that were sent to police and the press. Right? But we don't know, none of these letters that were sent have been confirmed 100% as being originating from the actual killer. It could have been someone who read a media story the next day, just sending a bullshit letter. Like the famous From Hell postcard. That was sent along with a piece of kidney or something. Turns out it was a hoax perpetrated by a medical student. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. I thought that was like the one, because a whole bunch of people were sending in letters to the media claiming to be the Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that was part of
proving it. No. Here's a human liver, and
yeah, and so almost all of them were dismissed as being fakes. Except for the From Hell one, I think, which was...
No, the From Hell one was fake. It was proven to be a hoax. The one that...
But at first it was held as being legitimate for a while?
I don't know. Or? The only one that I know that was held as being legitimate was on the morning of the double homicide. The police received a letter detailing the two killings before the media put the story out.
Oh, okay.
So there's no way anyone could have known that.
Oh, okay. What do we know about that letter? What was that letter claiming?
I don't remember the details of the letter, but it detailed the fact that...
good are you? God damn it.
It mentioned the fact that there were 2 killings on that night, and the media had not put the story out. Like, the details hadn't reached the media by that point.
Yeah, okay.
So it was another taunting letter to the police, like, I killed these 2 people, you missed me, something along those lines. Yeah. So that's the one letter that they kind of held as being more or less authentic.
I do have a certain faith in forensic science, in the ability to still be able to track down evidence on this stuff. I mean, I'm watching these true crime shows, and like, it is mind blowing what these people can do. Like, when I was talking about the character profiling, I watched one recently where he's just looking at photographs of the crime scene. And by the end, he'll be driving this kind of car, a Volkswagen, and it'll be either orange or red. And the dude is right. And all he's done is looked at pictures and blood spatter, and like I said, he just starts with that first question is organized or disorganized,
Uh-huh.
and then it's just a trail of probably just stats that he's looking at and connecting dots. It's amazing.
Have you seen the new Netflix show Mindhunter? I mean, not new. It's
right, yes,
its
I've been hearing
second
people
season
talking
just came
about it a
out.
lot.
Yeah,
and it's a David Fincher produced thing. He's directed a bunch of the episodes, and
that's cool. So
it's
it looks good.
really, really good, and it's about like the creation of the BAU at the FBI and the whole science around profiling and
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, profiling is an interesting subject.
Yeah,
it's like fascinating what these people can do. Like,
well, one of these FBI profilers actually has sort of eliminated that Kosminski, the Polish barber guy, that has been that was put forward in March there as being linked to as being Jack the Ripper because of DNA or whatever. He says that the guy just doesn't fit the profile.
Right. The cops are going, "Who has razor blades? A barber!"
Yeah, that's it. This Kosminski guy was in and out of insane asylums around that time.
Oh, I see.
So they're like, it's crazy guy. He's a barber, access to knives, gotta be him.
Yeah.
Plus the cum on the shawl.
Yeah, apparently he had like major paranoia, and he had severe like auditory.
He was always afraid he was going to be arrested.
Hallucinations. Yeah,
always looking over his shoulder because he killed a bunch of people. So, are we familiar with some of the other suspects?
Apparently, Lewis Carroll.
I've heard that. Yeah. Lewis Carroll was
the guy who wrote
Not
Alice
Louis.
in Wonderland.
Not Louis.
Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, the writer of Alice in Wonderland. I don't know how did that come
to. I don't understand that one.
There was the with this being like the first big like media circus kind of criminal case. There was like a ton of conspiracy theories that came out of it, and Lewis Carroll was one name put forward. Other people were like suggesting members of the royal family.
Yeah, Prince Edward, Philip Harry. What did that? He has like 4 names, and I can't remember.
Right.
But he was related to Queen Victoria, so
Yeah.
the conspiracy theory goes that he contracted syphilis from somebody in the Whitechapel district, and to cover it up, the Queen's like, we gotta get rid of these girls that you've been fucking around with. And which would mean they have all these resources at their disposal, and he took it upon himself to just kill them, and they made the whole thing just kind of disappear.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't buy that.
It sounds like we could have like an anthology, like little mini movies sort of thing, depicting different scenarios, creating
Right,
characters
right.
with all these ideas and stuff like that. I mean, it's fun to think about, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun mental exercise. There was another son. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was the roommate of the last woman who was killed, Mary Kelly.
Okay.
Apparently, like, he was just super infatuated with her, and he just wanted to get her off the street at one point. So the theory goes that he started killing prostitutes to scare her into just staying away from the area. But at one point, apparently they had a huge argument. 10 days later, she was found dead.
All right.
And
Well, this
then-
is interesting, no?
Yeah, like, this seems to be the
That sounds-
the best motive of all of
Right.
the weird conspiracy theories out there.
Starting
Although
his
serial
infatuation.
killers usually don't. I mean, they might start with somebody who's close with them,
But
who's
that's-
close
yeah.
to them,
Not
but they
end
don't
with it.
usually like
That's right.
practice to build up to like a direct motive.
That's true.
For
That-
killing
yeah.
somebody close to them, so that doesn't
true.
really fit the normal pattern, does it?
That is true. Yeah. So on those grounds, I think we can probably shelve that one
Right.
theory and that one suspect.
Well, okay, so at this point in time, is there a shift in the transience of people? Like, are people coming in and out of cities
yes.
quicker and
So
faster all of a
this is
sudden?
like in the middle of a population boom
Right.
for London. There's all kinds. There's a huge influx of immigration into London at this point, so Whitechapel is in the East End, and it's there's a lot of.
It's a ghetto.
It's a ghetto, yeah, and so there's a lot of people just coming through there that just have nothing, and
High concentration of brothels too, in the thousands actually.
oh really?
Yeah.
In the thousands?
Holy.
Prostitution-
Like, this is a way of survival for the people,
Yeah.
is basically what you're saying.
Prostitution
Yeah.
was legal as long as it didn't, quote, become a public nuisance.
Hey, may I ask, at this time in history, when we say brothel, is it it's a female brothel? Like there was no men prostitutes?
No,
Like, we don't talk about that,
homosexuality
or-
was illegal at
Very
that
legal.
time.
This is Victorian England.
Yeah, so a lot of
Okay.
the suspects actually, or a lot of the people that were proposed as potential suspects were gay people, because there was a huge.
They just vilified gay people.
That's it. They just vilified gay people, so they were like, "Oh, the guy's got to be gay.
Right,
He's
okay.
killing women,"
Well, clearly he must be gay.
which is kind of ironically like the opposite. Like if you're a serial killer killing women, it's
Only a gay could have done these crimes.
Do we know anything about the? Okay, now were these women were prostitutes? Were they from the same
Allegedly.
brothel or anything like that? Oh, okay, so we don't even know that much about it.
For the
so no,
longest-
they weren't technically prostitutes either.
Right.
That's the other thing that I was going to mention. Because
Yeah.
they're just people. So they all kind of have a similar profile in that they might have at one time have had a family or been married, and then were kind of.
Put into hard times, kind of thing.
Yeah, they like their marriage broke apart, and they were kicked out of the house.
Gotcha,
And
yeah,
they
okay.
just lost everything, and so they're all alcoholics, and they're all basically like hustling for cash to pay for that very night's sleep.
Yeah, gin was super cheap around that time, so everyone was just a gin head.
Okay.
Yeah, it was their means of escape from the crippling poverty of the area.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, give us a bit of an impression of what was going on. So,
Yeah.
a lot of women walking home drunk on gin, kind
Yeah,
of
the
thing,
fact that-
trying to survive.
The fact that prostitutes were being killed pretty much on a nightly basis didn't get a lot of media coverage until this Jack the Ripper stuff started happening, because it was just another prostitute died. Meh.
Yeah, and I'm almost thinking of it. It's like women would have been just referred to as prostitutes if they lived in that area. Like, I guess she's a prostitute,
Right.
because she needed to stay alive, and she's still alive, so she made it.
Yeah.
She made it to be killed, so she must have been a
She
prostitute.
made it to be killed.
Yeah.
So she must have been a prostitute. We have no idea really if she
Right.
was. Like, it may just be that women in that neighborhood were selling themselves to survive in general, kind of thing, you know. So everyone's just a
Yeah.
prostitute.
That's not beyond the realm of possibility. Like, if you happen to be in the area, you're either frequenting prostitutes or you are one.
Right.
Yeah.
Something that I've certainly noticed is that, not until some point in even the 70s or something, did police databases even start connecting other cities and stuff like that. So it could just be that because London, was able to put this stuff out on the media and say, hey, these murders happened, it doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't continuing to happen somewhere else, and it could have been some transient person just passing through, continuing to murder,
Yeah,
like he always did, sort of thing, and no one gives a fuck.
Some people suspect that there were at least 11 victims of
Yeah.
Jack the Ripper, but
only
the five
of them are confirmed.
Yeah,
or-
they call them the canonical five because these are the ones that have been confirmed to, for some reason, belong to Jack the Ripper.
Okay.
But it's quite possible that he got away with even more than just the canonical
Right.
five.
Okay. All right. The last one. It's interesting that the last one is different from what we
It's
know
the
from
most
the other
brutal.
five.
Like, it's the worst of
Yeah.
the five.
It's almost like there's some sort of symbolic significance.
There might
like
just
he's
be an
ripped-
escalation, like a perfection of his,
which is what they say
of
about
his
serial
process.
killers.
You know,
yeah.
the first one was also different in a sense.
Yeah, she was
because-
just disemboweled.
she was-
Just to disembowel.
Yeah.
Right. So the last one is done indoors because it's more evolved, needs more time. But when it's done inside, okay, now, a crime being done inside, the person has to have established comfort to be going through this process.
Not only that, but I don't think there were any signs of struggle or signs
Yeah.
of breaking in, right? So he had to have access to this woman's residence somehow.
Not only the access, but the comfort to go through this process and lay things out and let's stretch out some intestines, hang them over this picture frame, let's put the heart
redecorating
over
the
here.
room.
Yeah, he's decorating the room with the body sort of thing.
Yeah.
At this
Yeah.
point, it's become elaborate.
But didn't he do all that within 20 minutes or something? Because there was a
Something
guy
like
that had been standing outside for an hour,
Yeah.
waiting for her to be done with her
Right.
client. I think.
Right,
Oh.
yeah. He's next in line, kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, and then some guy just walks by covering his face, and he's like, "What happened here? Oh, a murder!
Hurry up, then! Come on!
Come on, then, Jimmy, let's go, chop chop."
We're queued up for miles out here. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, the setting of the last murder is just that's what sets this one apart. The fact that it was indoors, there were no signs of struggle. She was killed in her sleep, and it was the most brutal of all of the five murders. It's just super, super weird. Like, well, how did he get in there, and how did he get in there without waking anybody up? Which is another thing, right? Fascinating.
It doesn't make sense to me that it would have stopped. I'm curious about what stopped it, because it gets so elaborate and then it just ends there. I find that very curious. Why would it end there?
Well, that's why people like to link this Kosminski guy to,
Because he was incarcerated, or
because he vanished right after the murder stopped. Like, he's gone now. He's left London or whatever. No, never to be seen or heard from again.
Well, yeah, and that's curious, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
But again, circumstantial. Uh-oh.
sure, yeah,
The cat's about to be... There she goes. Carry on.
yeah. Peculiar, though. Oh yeah.
oh,
Let's just...
is the cat getting sick?
What were we just talking about?
Your cat barfing.
Okay, that's been taken care of. We're back, folks! So yeah, the last murder. Bizarre, different from the others.
Right.
Perfected, maybe one could say. There's an improvement.
And typically, you know, when we're looking at serial killers, they continue until they're caught.
They evolve.
They evolve and they get more elaborate.
Right.
And they have a curiosity.
Yeah, they don't just stop.
Yeah, they don't just stop.
Okay, that's enough. I'm satisfied.
I'm all killed out.
And
I'm all killed out. Yeah,
especially getting the attention, right, from the media and stuff like that, that would make them only more hungry in terms of what we've seen in terms of like serial killer profiles and stuff like that.
If these letters are to be believed, then he took great pleasure in taunting the police and the attention that he was getting from the media.
So why the hell would he just stop?
Why would he just stop?
Yeah, unless he was made to leave or had to go somewhere else, or he died.
Or he died. Well, he's definitely dead by now.
Yeah. Well, right. The age. I don't know. People didn't live very long back then, anyways, right?
Probably not. No, especially not in like East London, in the ghetto.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
you were living into your 30s, and if you made it to your 40s, you were doing real great, kind of thing. Or
life expectancy wasn't all that great. There and
I'm always surprised by this whole life expectancy thing. There's this graveyard close to my parents' place, and these people are, you know, from the last century. But I'm looking at their tombstones, and they all live to 90s. Like, it's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, but I think that speaks to the class differences in people. Like the people who can afford a plot with a tombstone are just the ones that have access to a doctor.
I see.
And who will live into their 80s or 90s.
This makes sense.
While most of the rest of the population just dies and gets put in a pine box with a little wooden cross on a
right. With no evidence of how short their life was.
That's it.
Yeah, the class thing is an interesting aspect to examine too. Some people think that he couldn't have been from the upper class just because of the shit grammar in these letters that were sent to the police and the media.
Yeah, but none of the letters were
right. None of them were confirmed.
Right, nothing backs up the letters,
be
really.
Authentic. Yeah.
So I don't know if anything could be taken from that, but
weren't a lot of the conspiracy theories based in class? Like, it must have been one of the elites that are abusing us poor folk or whatever.
Right.
Well,
it had to have been a doctor. So
it had to have been a doctor. Yeah.
Who was going into these areas? What kind of mixing of cultures was happening in these areas of London? Like was it all like who's going to these brothels?
Poor people.
Poor people are going to the
much.
brothels.
Yeah.
And then that prince guy who contracted syphilis.
And the prince, of course, yes.
The one lowly prince. Yeah.
Did you guys see that movie From Hell with
yes.
Johnny Depp?
I saw it a long time ago, yeah.
Long time ago?
Yeah.
That was pretty good. I like how they bring in all of this like occult stuff.
And the Freemasons.
The Freemasons and yeah.
I seem to remember the graphic novel being very similar to the movie as well. Have you read the graphic novel?
I haven't read that.
Oh.
Well, yeah, I think the movie is based on the graphic novel, right?
But what I mean is I think they did a pretty good job, a faithful adaptation from what
like
I remember.
stylistically or
Both, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it visually looks like it, and there's no change in the narrative or anything like that. Of the, I'm pretty sure. Like I seem to remember reading the graphic novel. It's like I remember neither, but I'm pretty sure I did both.
who turned out to be Jack the Ripper in that
one?
Wasn't it Ian Holmes?
It was a Freemason.
It was Queen Victoria's doctor, I think.
It was the doctor, right?
Yeah.
And I don't remember why, but
I don't
it was a fun story.
Yeah. So so it's funny that the conspiracy or the theories, let's just call them the theories or the hypotheses that are being thrown around, largely have this class dimension to them. There's also because of that population boom with the immigrants, like I guess kind of similar to what you see with the alt-right online, where there's all of this paranoia about the white genocide and about too many immigrants being allowed into Western countries and Europe and stuff like that, and that being the downfall of society and they're to blame for any rapes that happen and stuff. You have a similar thing going on with Jack the Ripper, where not only are there those class theories, but there's a big anti-Semite.
Yes.
dimension, like oh, it must be one of these Russian Jews or Polish Jews, or a lot of the suspects that are put forward are Jewish people
or immigrants.
Oh, really? Eh?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is also
Jewish
a large
immigrants.
part of the culture and the media at the time. And
Well, they during that double homicide, they followed a trail of blood to some graffiti on the wall that said, "The Jews are the men who will not be blamed for nothing," or whatever. This weird Jews is misspelt on the wall too.
It's like, I'm not going to trust the double negatives in that statement. I'm not exactly sure what I'm saying.
So they will be blamed
for everything?
For everything?
But that, in combination with a spelling error, it's like, how can you possibly trust what that person means to be saying right there?
Well, this is meaningless.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge anti-Semite dimension to it.
Yeah.
Which fuels the same type of conspiracies, like you said, that we're seeing in this quote-unquote alt-right. I don't like using the term alt-right. They're just fucking
They're
Nazis.
just the right, yeah.
They're just Nazis. There's no alt.
Yeah, right, there's no alt.
They're Nazis.
Yeah.
Can we settle on that?
That's a good point, too. I think the alt-right actually was invented by the right as like a way to make their...
To distance themselves.
No, to make their image more hip and cool and palatable to the young people who usually tended to gravitate towards like left...
Well, by throwing the word alt in it, like this is...
Like that makes it like alternative and counterculture and hip.
It's not a Usenet group.
I think that's basically what the idea was there. It's basically a marketing strategy.
Jesus. Well, it failed. They're still Nazis.
It did not fail. It did not fail, actually, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you're right. It didn't fail.
You're referring to it still continuing to fail us. We're not going to fall for your shit, guys.
Right.
Yeah. You're still Nazis. If there are any alt-right people listening to the show, stop. We don't want to hear it.
Or continue, and perhaps think a different way.
Yeah.
No, not perhaps. It's a good idea.
Maybe just stop being Nazis.
Have you considered not being a Nazi?
Have you considered? Oh God, it's disturbing how many times now I've seen like comments online where people are starting to defend Hitler.
Oh
even.
My God, what?
Like history's greatest monster.
When
or
have you
whatever.
looked into comments and they're not upsetting? Like, and it's usually a collection of not upsetting. Good. Oh, terrible.
Anonymous people online.
I don't know why I do it, but every time I read like a CBC article, I'm immediately drawn to the comments for some reason.
Yeah,
and it's just
it's
all
this
awful.
All this Trudeau boogeyman shit.
On stories that have nothing to do with Trudeau, like a story about the Toronto police adopting a kitten. Or Trudeau would fuck him.
You're right that the political ones seem to delve more quickly into the chaos of it all, sort of thing.
Right.
Like I've noticed on Facebook, I can read a news article and then I'm going to say just the general organization of friend comments and then friends within those friends or wherever it's coming from. It's not so bad, and it really seems to be more so just bad apples here and there, sort of thing, right? But as soon as you go to a more broader, open political thing, it's just chaos. Like,
well, what gets me is like I was reading comments on the Star Trek Facebook page, of all things, and there are a lot of Discovery haters out there for some reason. I don't know, Discovery's awesome, stop hating on Discovery.
Okay, yeah.
but
people do not like change.
They don't like change.
If it's just
this
slightly
is different.
in
I
any
hate
way.
it. I hate it because it's different. But I saw one guy comparing Discovery fans to Trump supporters, and I don't understand. I don't know how they made that connection. Like, how? What? Because apparently Discovery fans are so adamant in their defense of Discovery that they're like the MAGA people rooting for Trump, which makes no sense.
You're talking about someone drawing connections in their mind that are irrelevant to the conversation. Like that's just someone making like connecting dots to other dots in his mind. Right?
They're just throwing dots up and seeing if they can find a pattern. Yeah, it's super weird.
But there also seems to be distinct, like there is people that are so out there that they are just trolling. Like they're not saying anything meaningful. They're just upsetting people, kind of thing. Like they're so. I don't know if they're. Sometimes you can tell that it's intentional and they're just being jerks. But sometimes these people are just very confused. You know?
Yeah. So, do you think some of the letter writers in this Jack the Ripper case may have been like proto trolls, sending in like weird letters to the media.
Well, it
and
seems to be a
police.
very popular thing with in the police world, that people are people confessing to murders that haven't done it, people sending in letters claiming they have information. Like, it's super duper common, like way more, like it's mind-blowingly common is what I mean.
Yeah, and apparently they did get a lot of confession letters too, in addition to these taunting ones. Right? Just random people being like, "Yeah, I'm Jack the Ripper."
I really don't know if there's any research done on that, like why people even do that sort of thing. You know, do we have collected stats on why people are psychologically doing that? You know,
no idea.
Well, I mean, like just conversationally, or in whatever movies or TV that you see that kind of stuff, it usually boils down to like ego and them wanting to sort of glom on to something that'll give them infamy or
attention.
That'll give them attention or fame. You know, it's like their one chance at doing something.
But that also seems to be the case.
Will give them notoriety, you know, because they weren't able to do it. They're unsatisfied or unfulfilled in some other ways.
Some terrorist organization taking credit for another terrorist organization's activities, you know. Like, yeah, that was us. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, you're right. But often case too, the serial killer himself, and it usually is a him, is also has the same mind frame. Like, yeah, I was doing it for attention, and this is great, and I'm liking it. And
yeah, right.
It's funny.
Like, it's still ego play.
Yeah.
Funny you should mention the it's usually a man thing, because there's another, I guess, underground theory that Jack the Ripper was in fact a woman, which would explain why she was able to just navigate the area unseen by police, because she just blends into this prostitution background.
Right.
And it goes even further to say she may have been a midwife. That way, blood on her clothing just would have been looked the other way. You know.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good movie.
That would be a good movie.
She's just taking out the other bitches in her way, kind of thing. Make her a hero, you know?
Eliminating the competition, maybe.
They call it the Jill the Ripper theory.
Jill the Ripper.
Yeah.
Nice.
Huh.
Yeah. I was gonna use the term
doubtful.
I was about to use the term for people who investigate this Jack the Ripper case, but I don't want to. But I guess I have to now because I brought it up.
What?
Ripperologists. They call themselves.
Oh, you're kidding.
They call themselves ripperologists, which I find that completely. Stop. Just don't.
And I'll take it even further. Anyone calling themselves anything out there, just stop.
Just stop.
It's not true. Whatever you're thinking, no, that's not the only case.
It's pretentious and dumb.
A ripperologist.
Why do you throwing the word the Never mind. It's just I don't like it. I'm not going to use it. Just like I don't use the term ufologist.
Well, what sort of tangible things do we have in this case? What is there that they could even? Yeah, there's very little.
Very little.
It sounds like it just exploded in the media, and that's why we continue to know about it.
I mean, we have the shawl as the biggest piece of physical evidence in the case.
Is there other physical evidence at all?
I don't think so.
Like, there's no, at this point, autopsy reports and shit like that.
Oh,
like, we're
there's
just
that.
we're
there's
getting
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's no other types of forensic evidence like fingerprints and stuff like that, right? Like, which is weird because fingerprints were a thing at that time. So.
Yeah. Well, like I said, he was very meticulous about not leaving anything behind. There were no hair samples or anything. It was just.
I don't know if they would have been doing hair sample type stuff.
I'm just using
that as a
random example,
But fingerprints, yes.
Fingerprints were a thing in the late 1800s, yes.
I think it was just starting to become a thing, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah? Okay.
I don't know. I could be wrong about that. I'm probably wrong about that. So
So I would assume by what it sounds like that there probably were a lot of murders.
Oh yeah.
Before, so it probably wasn't just 5. They were this murderer. If he had committed these 5 murders, there likely would have been other murders as well. And it was really only because of in a sense, the gruesomeness of the murders, perhaps,
and the small geographical area,
the area, and the way that they were committed. Like, they all took place within,
and how close together they happened.
Yeah, it was all within this one tiny circle of the Whitechapel district. Yeah, the murders didn't spread beyond that. So I don't know about the
also how close together in time that they happened,
Yeah.
right? Like,
well, they're like
Yeah.
it's not like it
That's
spans
like-
several years.
no,
you're
it's just
right.
a few months.
Yeah.
right.
It happens in 2 months
Yeah.
and then just stops.
Just stops.
Yeah.
It was aliens.
With the 2-month contract on Earth.
A 2-month contract. Okay, you can stay for 2 months. Try not to kill anyone. But
Sorry.
if you do, make it really, really brutal so we can get some coverage about
They
it.
moved it. All right, that's it. You're on to cattle now.
You're on
You
to
guys
cattle.
are expelled from the human world.
Yeah,
You can
then
only hang out with cows.
Go draw circles and some crops or something.
Mutilate some cows.
Mutilate some cows. Probe people's butts. I hear that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's as far as we'll let you go. Bums. You can have our bums.
Oh, God.
So I don't have any other suspects aside from the ones I've talked about. There have been hundreds of suspects over the years.
Yeah, there's a really long Wikipedia page on
I'll
the
bet there
suspects.
is.
They've organized them by like the police suspects versus the general public suspects. Yeah, and there's
To me, something like this would be load all that information into a computer, see what kind of stats you can pull out of it, and I don't know. It's all been reduced to a science at this point. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Whatever's available there, let's load it into the computer, see what we come out with. And,
That would be good in terms of generating leads for potential suspects, but in terms of proving guilt,
yeah, there's no way that can be done at this point.
Yeah.
There's just not enough. There's nothing. Really.
there's a shawl and that's it at this point.
But that
Right.
yeah, it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily point to a conclusion one way or the other. This is the evidence. It's been handled too much for it to be reliable. We can do some kind of DNA analysis on it, but it'll be inconclusive. It might point to this guy, it might not. Right. So at this point, it's a cold case that I think will remain unsolved because we can't.
Is there any other in terms of history and serial killers and stuff like that? Are there any? Big ones around that time that we know about? Like, was this like? Is it? Why did this blow up? Why was
That
this
was
so?
my next question. What is it about this case that draws people's attention,
Yeah.
or like holds people's attention so much in pop culture? Like of all the movies that came out, all the books, all the independent investigations, why is this so fascinating?
Well, and you talked about literacy being on the uprise, there.
Right.
In a sense,
Right.
the printing press being probably something that was evolving and becoming very popular. Like people were on the corners going extra. The kid selling the paper. Like, would this have been happening at this time? Like people were getting their morning newspapers and.
It was definitely starting to take off more.
Yeah.
People were getting into
the general public were reading the news.
Yeah.
So this case was sensationalized, like it was in a very small.
The ironic thing, I remember hearing in one of the things I watched about Jack the Ripper was that after that last murder, instead of the media looking for or drumming or sort of reviving its frenzy of material on it, it just kind of died off after.
it was the end of the news cycle for that
What,
one.
really?
That's it. It's like they just moved on. They like even
As
though
if
it
that
was
the
it
end
was
of the
the
story
worst
in the media.
It was the worst of the murders and
Got the least attention.
got the least attention, or
Yeah, that is really weird.
that's kind of odd. Like
Well, this almost suggests that it could have just kept on happening and no one gave a fuck.
that. Well,
You know?
that's
Just went back to status
maybe.
quo.
Yeah,
Prostitutes
exactly.
dying and no one saying
And no one
anything
gave a
about it.
shit. And this
Yeah.
is more likely.
This is no
all the
longer
time.
a story. This is just. I guess this is the new normal.
Like, it's not as if we have.
Someone got eviscerated. Oh, well.
Another one, yeah.
Another one.
As part of the research into this case, though, they don't have access to continued police files or anything, do they? They're more so relying on what? On what's reported in the media? Like, what are we looking at here?
No. Scotland Yard is pretty organized.
Yeah, okay,
and,
okay. So there would be... but they're just... Right. The police may themselves have been following the media and interested in the case and then therefore not giving a shit. Like,
Well, the chief of, I think it was the chief of police or chief investigator or something. He stepped down after all this happened because he couldn't solve the case. She was like, my bad, I'm out, I suck.
And in a sense, you've got to get it out of the public attention because it's an unsolved case. In a sense, they could have just kept it under...
They could have buried the story?
Could have buried the story, yeah. Because of that necessity of where you better solve this thing, sort of thing, So let's give it a nice punchline, killed inside, different sort of scenario. That becomes the end of the case, whereas in reality it may have simply continued and we don't know about it. I don't know though, right? That's what I'm saying. Do we have access to these police files from like?
Like, independent investigators, I'm going to say routinely access the Scotland Yard files on the Jack the Ripper case.
Okay, I see.
It's because like, what else do they have access to, right? I think there was one instance of them not granting access to a certain file or a set of files or something for an investigation, but that's like an isolated incident.
Okay.
So yeah. We need to buy 15 minutes or wrap it up now.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, what else is there to talk about in terms of...
Where are we at?
45.
Okay. 45 minutes
Jack. It could be Jack the Jipper. We jip him on a bit of time. It's not as long.
Speaking of anti-Semitism.
What? All right. Final thoughts on the case of Jack the Ripper, or Jill the Ripper, if you want to believe that one.
Well, I honestly, I compare it to our D.B. Cooper episode, where it becomes this phenomenon through the media. It's culture making something of it, sort of thing, at the time, and so it's relevant to the time and the space it's happening, and that's why it's become such an interesting story, I think.
Yeah, it seems to come in waves. Like there's this period of high interest in the Jack the Ripper case, then it kind of dies down and comes back every now and then. Like around the time From Hell came out, it was peaking. Like there was a definite kind of Jack the Ripper stuff,
Yeah.
And why would that have been?
I don't know.
It could be tied in with.
I think it was because Johnny Depp was in it, and people like.
Oh, okay. You're saying that the graphic novel, in a sense,
I think so.
Brought it back. Okay. Yeah. And then every other time it's probably due to someone presenting some sort of new evidence or something as evidence or something like that. Hey, I've got something else to.
Sure you do. But the funny thing is, talking about new evidence, is this DNA analysis had been done a couple of years ago, but people rejected it because it was never submitted to a peer-reviewed journal. So only recently did they redo the analysis and submit it for peer review, which is why it got traction again, and they say they can, quote-unquote, definitively point to this Kosminski dude. But some of the same problems that were present before peer review are still there. So, I don't think we can conclusively point to anything.
Right, with how... Right, yeah. I see what you're saying. Like, in a sense, they've got something that they could have maybe built up a court case with back then, but it was never done. No, not even?
No, because...
Well, I'm thinking people would have been being put away for much less evidence.
Are you talking... When you say back then, do you mean around the 1800s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, back then, maybe if they had some kind of evidence, they could have put together a court case and just committed the wrong person to jail or whatever, because they, I guess they would do that.
Yeah.
But now there's even less of a chance of them putting together a solid case.
Yeah.
Like the one piece of evidence that they have is inadmissible.
Right.
So what do you got?
What I guess what I was talking about there is that it took less to put someone away back then.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, they weren't exactly thriving in terms of like awesome criminal justice systems back in the day, especially in England.
Right.
Everything was subject to the crown, and if you fuck with them, you're in jail. Yeah. Human rights, fuck them.
I like the case's place in sort of the history of forensic science and criminology and stuff like that. Like there was one investigator that was mentioned that is basically doing sort of proto profiling. Like he's talking about who this person must have been based on victimology and stuff, which didn't really exist until 100 years later, right?
Right.
So I like that whole aspect of it. It's like the first big serial killer case. Like they didn't even have a term for serial killers back then. That also only came out of the new the new profiling science and stuff that came out in the 70s.
Yeah, no, that is pretty cool when you think about it. Like just the advent of forensic science and that was being applied to the case at the time. That we can see the elements of the kind of investigative techniques that we use today, which is awesome when you think about it.
Yeah, because I think the case, basically you can hold it up as a case study for just an example of a case where it's just like a glaring omission. Like, this is stuff that we need.
Right.
There's a bunch of techniques and tools that we should be able to be employing to try and figure out what this is, and we just don't have them yet.
Well,
and then when forensic science and profiling and stuff like that comes up, then that would also revive interest in Jack the Ripper, right? Because you would want to sort of
and the key word is interest. It required the interest to do so. To even begin to develop these techniques and stuff like that.
Yeah, the whole idea of DNA analysis was just so beyond them at that point. Right? Had they access to that type of technology and that type of technique, would things have gone a little bit differently? I think? Would they have scoured the murder scenes a little bit more?
Well, like also like the first thing they would want to do when they would find a body, right? Back then, the first thing they want to do is limit the panic and interest from the public, so immediately if a body is found, the cops are like, oh, better pick this up right away, bring the police ambulance over so we can get the body back to the morgue
and
right
lock
away.
this away.
Whereas now you would want to cordon the whole area off and analyze everything around the body.
The idea of not contaminating the scene just didn't exist.
No, that didn't exist back then.
It's like, we gotta just hide that. No, just get in there. I don't care. Scour it clean.
That's why it's not surprising that they wouldn't have like hair evidence and stuff like that. But,
they just wanted to whitewash it as quickly as possible. Oh God, passersby! Look away!
No, you're right. It would be the equivalent of get out the water hose, Larry. Come on, gotta clean this up. Quick.
There's still blood. Get rid of it. Spray that down. So I think my final thought on the issue would be that I doubt we'll ever find out who did this. Like, regardless of, it's been 131 years for one thing.
Right. What would we have to look at? Maybe the bodies. Do they have access to the? Could they exhume the bodies and take a look at the bodies?
I don't know what that
collect evidence.
I don't know what
some sort.
What further evidence that would produce, to be honest. Like, what more could they look at? The bodies are severely decomposed at this point. Like, they can still, like, because they were mostly like organ and flesh wounds and stuff like that. That kind of, you wouldn't be able to look at that today. I think there's a certain degree to which you could examine an exhumed corpse and determine how it died or whatever, just based on certain things.
There, I guess we could look at technique in the murder itself, and they could give us maybe a little bit more information on the skill of the cut or the type of cut, whether or not it was an angry cut or not, like aggressive or non-aggressive, that type of thing.
Right.
I guess could be
maybe
could
I
be
don't
looked
know.
at, you know?
I have no idea.
And then it could give us maybe a little bit more profile insight into the killer, but that's it. No evidence leading to anyone is what I'm getting, but maybe more so of a character profile, looking at the bodies.
I'm sure someone has done a profile or pseudo profile of Jack the Ripper at some point, which I'd love to read just to see what how.
There really is no evidence. This is what I'm saying. They're not looking at much that's hard, is what I'm getting at. You know? Like with today's collection of evidence, we're looking at a photograph, and even so, that photograph becomes hard evidence.
Right.
We're looking at it, and we are seeing the blood spatter, and stuff like that.
There were photographs taken of each of the different scenes.
Well, there you go.
Right?
And so the photographs can stand as evidence as to what further evidence for analysis.
It's evidence that something was done, but beyond that, what else can you can determine, like
possibly how it was done.
Possibly how it was done, but not you can't from that photograph determine any type of suspect.
Well, were there any photos taken of that final crime scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be the most curious thing as to how quickly it was done. You're saying someone was waiting outside the room while it was taking place?
Like downstairs,
like down the alleyway or something. He was waiting for her to come back out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Not necessarily within earshot, but
That's it.
someone was just like around the area at the time.
Yeah, he had seen her and spoken to her just before she went off with
And
this other
she
guy.
anticipated being gone. What was the 20-minute mark? You were saying something about 20 minutes, like that it took place in 20 minutes.
I think I heard that that he would have had to do the thing in 20
Do the
minutes.
deed.
Do the deed in
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's your final thought?
That was my final thought.
That
Actually,
was?
the whole the thing about
Oh, the
the
forensics.
the forensics and yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that wraps it up then. This has been Critical Junction episode 64. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Shell.
As always, thanks for listening, and until next time, keep thinking critically.